The first thing we must get rid of is this idea that what makes us Christian is anything that we have produced or anything for which we are responsible. The New Testament at once shows us the total inadequacy of the common current version of what constitutes a Christian. The New Testament terms are regeneration, a new creation, being born again. Those are its categories. And it is only as we stand face to face with them that we begin to realize what a tremendous thing it is to be a Christian. But let me analyze that a little in terms John uses here. The first thing, therefore, is that what makes men and women Christians is something that is done to them by God, not something they do themselves. Whosoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God. And then everyone that loves him that begot God, according to John, is the one who begets us. It is God's action, not ours. God's action. And now we need not take time in emphasizing the obvious contrast in each of these subdivisions. How ready we are to think of being a Christian as the result of something that we do. I live a good life, therefore I am a Christian. I go to a place of worship, therefore I am a Christian. I do not do certain things, therefore I am a Christian. I believe, therefore I am a Christian. The whole emphasis is upon myself, upon what I do. Whereas here, at the very beginning of the New Testament definition of a Christian, the entire emphasis is not upon man and his activity, but upon God. He who begot, he who produced, he who generates, he who gives life and being. Thus, we see that we cannot be a Christian at all unless God has done something to us. But I go beyond that and say, in the second place, that what makes us a Christian is something that makes us like God. Whosoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God. That "of" is an important word. It means out of God. This is one who has received something of God himself. Therefore, the action of God in making us Christian is not merely an external one. It does not merely touch us on the outside. And in this respect, we must always be very careful in our use of the word creation. When God created the world, He did not impart Himself to it. He made it outside Himself. But in the new creation, in the rebirth that makes us Christian, the New Testament teaching is that we do receive something of God's own nature. We have been made partakers, says Apostle Peter, of the divine nature, 2 Peter 1:4. We are sharers in and participators of it. So the New Testament idea of what makes us Christian is not that we happen to be born in a certain country, nor that our parents happen to be Christians. Not at all. Rather, it is nothing less than that we have been born out of God. We are those who have received something of the divine nature. Now, we have to be very careful with this doctrine. We must not think of it in any material sense. It does not mean that I receive some kind of essence or something tangible and material. But it doesn't mean that I receive the spiritual nature and the spiritual outlook and disposition of God Himself. To be born again means to receive this new disposition. That is what is meant by a new nature. So it is something that is done to us by God that makes us like God. Therefore, I go on to deduce that it is something that makes an essential difference to us and something that also makes an essential difference in us. In other words, according to the New Testament, when we become Christian, we are entirely unlike what we were before. If any man be in Christ, says Paul, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. I am transformed. Profound language for the change that takes place when a person becomes a Christian. I am showing you how utterly superficial the current notions are, because it is the action of God upon us. It is as profound as that. I am, yet not I. I am something essentially different, and indeed I must be, if I have now become a partaker of the divine nature. Therefore, when men and women become Christians, they are aware of this great difference in their lives. They can contrast their present self with their former self. Now I am not insisting upon their being able to point to a particular moment. What I am saying is that those who are Christians realize there is that about their lives that was not once the case. And there is an awareness of this divine action, and they are different from what they once were. I would also put it like this, that Christians are always aware of the fact that they are essentially different from those who are not Christians. Now, the moment one says a thing like that, the response of the man of the world is, that is a typical of you Christians. It is your spiritual pride. You say, I thank God I am not like other people. Well, yes, if I am a Christian at all, I must say that. But the way in which I do so is of tremendous importance. The Pharisees said that in that way, God, I thank Thee that I am not as other men are. He was proud of himself, and he despised the publican. Luke chapter 8, verses 9 to 15. Christians do not say it like that, but rather with profound humility. They say, I thank God that I am not as that other poor man still is and as I once was. I thank God that He has not left me in that state and condition, that He has acted upon me and given me a new birth. They are not priding themselves. Their pride is in God, in Christ's activity within them. So we must not be guilty of this false and spurious modesty. If I am not thankful to God that I am not like the worldling who is living in sin and vice, I am not a Christian at all. I should rejoice in the fact that God has had mercy upon me and has dealt with me and has made me so different from the men and women of the world who do not know Him and do not see their need of Christ. It follows of necessity that if we are born of God, we must obviously be very different from those who are not. And we should rejoice in the difference. So the last deduction is that this activity of God upon us is something that makes us like all other Christians. Whosoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and everyone that loves Him that begot loves Him also that is begotten of Him. All those who are begotten of him must be alike, because they are all begotten of him. So you see, it is a simple deduction. As a Christian, I am new and different from what I once was. I am different from the person who is not a Christian, but of necessity, I must be like all who are Christians. And there is a likeness in the members of our family. Those who are begotten of the same Father have the marks and the traces of the common parenthood upon them. In the same way, there is a likeness about the people of God. And this is one of the most glorious things about being a Christian. You recognize the others, you see the likeness in them. It is a very good test of whether we are Christians at all, that we can recognize a brother or a sister. We see the mark and we understand it. Now, that is where I think we have one of those final proofs that being a Christian means to be born again. For by nature, birth and temperament, we are also very different. As we were by nature, we would not recognize an affinity with those whom we may heartily dislike and with whom we have nothing in common. But the essential thing about the Christian position is that we recognize something in common with people who by nature and birth are different. So the church is thus in herself a standing testimony of the doctrine of rebirth. In the Christian church, you have people of every conceivable temperament and psychological makeup, and yet they are all one. Why? Because they recognize this common element. They have all been begotten of the same Father, and they love one another because they recognize this similarity and likeness, this common inheritance that they share together. There then are some of the deductions that we draw from this profound New Testament concept as to what it is that makes us Christians, born of God, begotten of God. Therefore, I ask the obvious question at this point: are we aware of the fact that God has begotten us? Do we know that God has produced the man or woman in us that is not ourselves and not of ourselves? As we examine ourselves, have we come to say, I am what I am by the grace of God, not by my activities, nor by my interest, not by my belief, nor by the fact that I do or do not do certain things. I am what I am by the grace of God, who has brought me to a rebirth, and who has given me his own nature and disposition. John assumes that it is the New Testament assumption everywhere about the Christian. Again, I must say it, what a tremendous thing it is to be a Christian. Oh, how we vie with one another in seeking earthly honors, how we try to prove that we are related, however remotely, to somebody who happens to be great. We attach great importance to these things. Yet, what the humblest Christian can claim is that he is a child of God, born of God, out of God, generated by God. That is the very essence of what is meant according to the New Testament by being a Christian. The second great principle is the results or the fruits of the rebirth.